response to it. And then somebody said, okay, we'll go right now, you're right. Like I said, she said, anyway, and then, so, I said, she did not give me a whole lot of information. It's not long, well, they came back from the for some, that's what I was like.
Believe it or not, I'm going to
And that was not long after that, but this young, yeah, came out and really? Did I hear? The Methodist group that they know.
Good morning. Good morning. How are you?
Good morning.
I am pretty good. I didn't bring my coffee this morning. I was debating whether I want to make a coffee. I don't know if I'm I know. I need at least 2 cups in the morning. I've had 2 coffees.
It was funny, we walked in, you were standing there and all these women were here, and we said, and they were just, and your back was to us, they were all facing you. We said he was there. Ask him to do something more than we're ready.
which is okay. Oh, I hear it.
Well, he is careful. Did you find the song?
Good morning. Good morning.
You met him good time, Joe.
Good morning, sir. Thank you for your work.
We got it done. That's 10 minutes ready. I'm glad you guys did it. I came Saturday to do it. It was already done.
I don't want to be on the, I need to be on the other side. I still want to be this way.
Yeah, you just got out of this. Come on.
We need to get started this morning because we've got a little additional thing that we need to cover for our edification as Methodists. So, we're going to continue our discussion of just war and how it can extend into places that you would never think about war.
Exactly. I want to begin by quoting Barack Obama's Nobel Prize winning speech in 2009. And as you listen, I want you to think about how his understanding is informed by the just war tradition, understanding, discipline, theory. Now he's speaking as a head of state of the most powerful country in the world. If any of you want this, I'll be glad to make you copies after the lesson. For most of history, this concept of just war was rarely observed, and we've seen that in the last few weeks. The capacity of human beings to think up new ways to kill one another proved inexhaustible, as did our capacity to exempt from mercy those who look different or pray to a different God. Wars between armies gave way to wars between nations. Total wars in which the distinction between combatant and civilian became blurred. In the span of 30 years, such carnage would twice engulf this continent. Remember, he's speaking in Europe. And while it's hard to conceive of a cause more just than the defeat of the Third Reich and the Axis powers, World War II was a conflict in which the total number of civilians who died exceeded the total number of soldiers who perished. I did not bring with me today a definitive solution to the problems of war. What I do know is that meeting these challenges will require the same vision, hard work, and persistence of those men and women who acted so boldly decades ago. And it will require us to think in new ways about the notions of just war and the imperatives of a just peace. We must begin by acknowledging the hard truth that we will not eradicate violent conflict in our lifetimes. There will be times when nations, acting individually or in concert, will find the use of force not only necessarily but morally justified. I make this statement mindful of what Martin Luther King said in this same ceremony years ago. Quote, "Violence never brings permanent peace. It solves no social problems. It merely creates new and more complicated ones." Unquote. As someone who stands here as a direct consequence of Dr. King's life's work, I am living testimony to the moral force of nonviolence. I know there's nothing weak, nothing passive, nothing naive in the creed and lives of Gandhi and King. But as a head of state, sworn to protect and defend my nation, I cannot be guided by their examples alone. I face the world as it is and cannot stand idle in the face of threats to the American people. For make no mistake, evil does exist in the world. And a nonviolent movement could not have halted Hitler's armies. Negotiations cannot convince Al-Qaeda's leaders to lay down their arms. To say that force is sometimes necessary is not a call to cynicism. It is a recognition of history, the imperfection of man, and the limits of reason. I raise this point because in many countries there is a deep ambivalence about military action today, no matter the cause. Close quote. I'll close that part of the speech. Some of you who are theologians, all of us are theologians if we think about God and God's relation to us. Who is he taking his understanding from in the 20th century?
Sounded very much like that part where Jesus says there will be wars and rumors of wars.
He is, yes, he is talking, he's speaking from, as a Christian, although he doesn't say that. Probably, and some of you may want to argue about this later, probably the most theologically trained and schooled president we have had. You like him, you don't like him, that's okay. But in terms of his grounding, he's probably, even including Woodrow Wilson, the son of a preacher, the most theologically astute president we have had. He's almost quoting Ronald Niebuhr. You might want to Google Ronald Niebuhr on Wart. Now, we have been looking at how we love our neighbor and love our enemy in the midst of and contemplating and after war. I have given you a cheat sheet after each class, and if any of you don't have those cheat sheets and want them, I'll be glad to share them with you. And that includes anyone who's with us by Zoom. My email address is Wiley Cooper @gmail.com. All you have to do is ask. Now, I want to move from nations, unless you want to comment on this in any way.
Tell me again, I was moving around and not paying attention. Who are you reading from?
I'm reading from Barack Obama's Nobel Prize winning speech in 2009.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, I want to shift. I want to talk about just peace and glance at just war in the context of divorce, and a very specific divorce. No, it's not the one that Emily went through or the one that I went through. It's one related in Glennon Doyle's autobiography, Untamed. When she had a very writing career, success, an outwardly successful marriage, 3 children, recovered from drug addiction, alcohol addiction, bulimia, and several other challenges. Her husband was a good father. He was also a philanderer. And she had forgiven him in her mind. But they had a partnership, not a marriage. And she really didn't understand that until she met another woman and decided that she had to divorce. Quote, I have to either leave him or myself. I'm going to leave him. Now that I know this, I have to tell him that I know. I don't owe Craig the rest of my life, but I do owe him my honesty. It'll be hard, but it'll finally be the right kind of hard. That afternoon I sat down with Craig and I said with tenderness but without apology that I was leaving. I said, our marriage is complete. We've been the healing partners we were meant to be for each other. Our marriage has been a great success, and now it's done. I'm in love with Abby. As soon as I knew, I needed for you to know too. He was very quiet, and after a long while he said, 3 years ago you gave me more grace than I deserved. That's when she found out that he was running around. Now I'm going to return it to you. I want you to be happy. We didn't stay in that place. The next few months were a roller coaster, but we kept coming back to grace for you, grace for me. Later, when he was ready, we sat down to tell the kids. I've hurt many people I love in my life, but that was the worst of it. Any of you who've been through divorce with children in the picture know that feeling, that understanding. I looked directly into my baby's terrified faces and said, I'm about to break your hearts. Over time, we will rebuild our hearts and they will be bigger and stronger. But for now, it's just going to hurt. Sometimes we have to do hard things because they are true things. Your dad and I want you to live the truth of who you are, even when it's hard and scary and painful. I'm about to show you how that's done. They cried. The news changed them right there on the couch. I saw it happen. We held one another while we let so much burn. Craig told them, it's going to be okay. Abby's a good woman. We're going to be a new kind of family, but we're still going to be a beautiful family. He gave our children permission to love Abby, which was the greatest gift he's ever given. Maybe the greatest gift anyone has ever given me. We told our families. We told our friends. Just peace. Just peace. I recommend this book only on prescription. You don't swallow it like a horse pill, but I have found it to be a real help to understanding challenges and life experiences that I have and have not experienced. So, enough of that. Now, looking back just for a second, well, a minute or two, at Just Peace, which we dealt with last time. Ethical reason for ending war. Did the country's people affected apologize apologize, surrender, negotiate terms, and promise not to seek revenge? Are the terms of surrender proportional to the wrongs done? Has the declaration of peace been made and accepted by proper authorities? The principle of justice following war should be universalizable and morally ordered. Victory should not provide a license for imposing unduly harsh or punitive measures. Also, state or commercial interests should not dictate the form of the new peace. Can you see that in that what I read? I hope you can. Now, as most of you, I think all of you in this room, and most of you watching know, the United Methodist Church is going through a divorce. Some might say a war. This is their name, not mine. The Global Methodist Church was formed the 1st of this month. You saw maybe an article on it in the,
Right here.
yes, in the Citizen Times. I think the headline was misstated, but that's my understanding now. We have been struggling with the issues connected with this divorce for at least 30 years, and actually more than that. Two totally different understandings of what being church means, what being followers of Jesus means, what respecting and loving and using as our prime, or one of our prime understandings of the Bible and the church and the history of the church means. And that has played out in a number of ways. It has played out in the decision this church made a few years ago, when we decided that we were going to be truly a reconciling congregation, not just in name, but we were going to be a church for all people of whatever story, of whatever history, that welcomed the perspectives and understandings and talents and faith of all. And we have been moving for several years in that direction. I dare say that the division in the United Methodist Church does not need to affect this congregation, except as an opportunity to quit fighting and get on with our mission. Now, the headline said, show it to us, Con.
Traditionalist Methodist denomination takes shape.
For them, traditionalist means defining a church by a definition of belief statements, a particular way of looking at Scripture, and a particular way, a negative way, of looking at all sexuality except heterosexual sexuality within marriage. For us, being church means something very different from that. It does not mean that we do not embrace the tradition, the whole tradition of the Christian church. It does not mean that second only to Jesus the Word, the Bible does not contain all things necessary for living and salvation. That's the whole tradition. It does not mean that we define whether a person is a follower of Jesus by whether or not that person can give the right answers to all the questions that we all have. It means something very different. As long as we are embracing what we have decided and growing into what we have decided to be, because we ain't there yet. We have an opportunity to receive Methodist Christians and other Christians who have been hurt and who will be hurt by this experience, this division. Now, anybody want to comment on that piece? By the way, we just decided to do this back there. So I'm kind of winging it. Anybody want to jump in, please?
Wiley, I've had young people when I was teaching who were homosexual and found the damage that church had done to them was so overwhelming that they no longer found any refuge in organized religion.
Exactly.
Yes.
And we all know people who, for various reasons, including their sexuality, their gender, their life experience, their other challenges that they are dealing with or other experiences they have, is deeply hurt by the church. And I'm saying the Little C church. And if any of you want to talk about that, you're welcome now. Maybe there are people who have been hurt by this congregation in the past. That's why it's so important that we consistently, visibly, and clearly make who we are known to our total geographic community. And some won't like it. That's okay. We've got lots of churches that they will be happy now. But you're exactly right. How do we make clear and make compelling that the church that they have rejected is not this one? Is one question we have to deal with.
And let me make one more point. It's not only sexuality, it's people whose life experience have experiences like drug addiction or any other issue that has come up in their lives. Any of those people might be included in this as well.
Absolutely. And I think that's why our leaders welcomed AA and NA. Now the problem is that we have not given enough attention to how we reach those people who are in our walls every week and make sure that they understand who we are. And we need to work on that.
That's a very thin line because they do request
Yes,
privacy
yes.
and anonymity.
Absolutely, but we have members who are members of those groups or who are families of members of those groups. And to use a wonderful, I think, expression of the LGBTQ plus community, we need to come out of the closet wherever we are as who we are. That's not violating anybody. We're just using an example. Now back to the divorce in the
May I ask a
in the church.
question first? As we are open to everybody and doing all the things we just talked about, there are those few who have grown up in a church that totally disagree. And so they might feel that this church and others have abandoned them. How do we deal with changing their position or their minds, or what are we doing to say this is why we've made these decisions?
We have to be clear, but the other piece is, and this is why, with great sorrow, I've been a Methodist, then a United Methodist, literally all my life. And the coming together of the Methodist tribe has been a great joy for me. That's why this separation has been and is going to be hard. It is time that we begin a just peace. And that has begun. Now, this is Wiley's interpretation. Please disagree, question, say you're smoking something that's okay. Because I don't know if I'm right.
I think the potential is there with this movement for a just peace, but how we've been getting there, I don't know that that necessarily reflects a just peace. Maybe it will be a just peace once it's all said and done.
Okay.
But the process and the potential continued harm that has existed may endanger that just peace along the way up there.
Well, let's look at that. Yes, John.
I don't want to sound pessimistic, but because I read that article, even though I don't know how to read it later, that one caught my attention. Like anything else in today's society, especially American society and the Western world, it's who wins the messaging war. And how it can be a just peace, but with all disinformation and everything, if you have one side that is saying, okay, we're already been preparing all this time for the separation, we're going to give this and this, so everything will work out, and the other one says the only reason this is happening is because I won and I took it. That becomes a hard, so now it's which you're going to hear two different narratives. That's what I'm worried about, because, you know, this wasn't supposed to happen until 2024 because of the COVID that threw this thing out all completely out of whack. It should have happened, except for COVID's the only reason it didn't happen. And one side says, we're not waiting anymore, and we won this war. We're demanding this and we're taking it, rather than the other side is saying, well, this has been set up all along, you were supposed to get this.
Okay.
It makes it a hard.
Let me give you some positive and negative facts about what's happening. And I would remind you that just when your enemy misrepresents, lies, violates just war understanding, that does not give you permission to do the same, even if that is costly. Now, the decision has not been legally made, as you said, but there are some decisions that really have been made. Number one, the two sides have agreed that we cannot pretend that there is no division. It's there. I think the delay has been really, really bad for both sides. And there is a small, more progressive group that is about to do the same. But it will be small. The global church people have misrepresented the position and the stance of the United Methodist Church on a number of things. And I know this from the South Carolina conference, from the experience at Bumpkin Street Methodist Church in Greenville and others, and I have their literature. Basically, it's saying the United Methodist Church no longer believes in anything except we want everybody to be a part of us. That simply is not the case, and it's our job to be clear about what we do believe. and to reach out creatively to our community. And maybe it's not just geographic. Maybe it's a community of people who are committed to people who are hurting.
Well, I think our mission statement is wonderful because it does specify, and it's not quite so general like.
Our welcoming statement, yes.
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 Now, one thing, so a way of a congregation leaving the church has been clearly defined. And it is basically fair. Congregation must vote 70%, 65 or 70% to leave. It's a high number, but it's a big decision. You don't have to make any decision if you want to stay.
Well, I'm behind the times. Which group are you saying? Which group is the one that they're saying that this is it and you can break off from it? Is that the global one or is that the United Methodist?
The break-off church that has formed is the name, the official name is the Global Methodist Church.
Okay, so if you choose to stay, that just means you're going to be named
You're going
United
to be
Methodist
United
Church.
Methodist.
If you break off, you go into the global.
You go to that or another.
Okay.
You can become a Wesleyan Methodist.
Okay.
You
That
can
helps.
become a Southern Methodist. There is such a thing. Based in Orangeburg, South Carolina. There are others. There's even a Republican Methodist Church. And they don't mean what you think they mean. It's pre-Civil War.
So basically, though, people
So
that are
if you're
forming
going
new
to
things
leave
are
for any
from
reason, 70%, you must have your apportionments current. You must have your clergy retirement current. In other words, you must not leave the church, the United Methodist Church, with a burden.
But that's a financial thing that has been concentrated upon, I think, at the expense of other things which are more equally and maybe more important.
I totally agree. However, the former United Methodist women, did you know your name has changed? Well, it has. I believe it's called Methodist Women in Mission or something like that. And it can include members of the other denomination.
Oh my goodness, I did not know that.
And
Forgive me for leaving. We're due in.
the retirement plan can continue to include both denominations. And there are mission opportunities under our present Board of Missions that are open to the global church as well, Methodist Church, as well as the United Methodist Church. Now, that's getting toward a few of the things that you're talking about.
And I think one of the things that we sometimes miss is that the word global has its roots probably in the fact that there are a large number of African churches that very much because of their culture are lined up against any expression of homosexuality.
Yes.
and they have voting rights. And while their contribution to the church, United Methodist Church, maybe is not as monetarily attractive, they do have a large number of members.
And growing. Now, that is why the reconciling movement is assertively is now multi-continent, including Africa. And it is very important that what we're a part of is present in Africa precisely because of the cultural framework of most of Southern Africa. For example, it's a Christian, Muslim, they are mostly Christian and Muslim nations. And the Muslims have even a worse attitude toward LGBTQ plus folks than conservative Christians. And the concern about the many Africans, not all Methodists, is if we come out open like the United Methodist Church is coming out, are we going to lose our membership? Or are we going to not be able to gain new Christians? So that's all being worked on. We are at the very beginning of a very difficult time in the total church. The decision has been made by the Judicial Council that conferences may not secede from the Union. That is, the Western North Carolina Conference cannot, as a whole, become a member of the Global Methodist Church. Why? Because that would preempt the congregation's responsibility. Now, so we are struggling to create a just peace out of a situation where the war has definitely not always been just. But that effort is there. And there is a base for it. I want to close for today, because you can't cover this in one class, and it's not sufficient for this number of people to know what's going on. So we need to think about how we address this openly, but not in panic.
I think probably we should continue, at least for part of next week, on looking at where we are in this process.
This church?
This church. And what the next moves will likely be.
Okay, that's, I'm not sure. Yeah, I think we are going to be here next week.
And I think that after we get a better idea about that, we ought to look at where our nation is in terms of its internal struggles.
Yes.
With,
by the way, this gives the United Methodist Church a chance to do something that we have needed to do for many years.
Well, that would be
We
something.
need to simplify our structure. And, but I want to close this way. When it comes to, by reiterating something, we at Mars Hill United Methodist Church, one, have made our decision, and it's a missional decision. We do not have to be organizationally or we do not have to do anything more to remain United Methodist or to remain a reconciling congregation. We have made that decision.
But we do have to, if we remain in the United Methodist.
We don't have to do anything to remain in the United Methodist.
But we have to contribute our funds to the district and to the conference.
Yes.
So we are supporting them, and we have an obligation, in my opinion, if we differ strongly from them, to at least make our voice heard.
Absolutely, but what I'm saying to you is, especially in the Western North Carolina Conference, which is a conference uniquely graced in the Southeast. We have a supportive bishop, not a out front bishop, but a supportive bishop. We have an amazing, and have had for several years, amazing district superintendents who want this church to be what it is and what it's becoming. We have a conference that right now, and we're toward the end of a piece of this, but right now is being supported by the conference to move our mission forward. And I think we have some ways we can make that happen some more. We have a wonderful opportunity that we are struggling to know how to deal with, but it's a wonderful opportunity to make Mars Hill students a part of us and people across the street a part of us. Our immediate neighborhood, strangely enough, is all in one place. And we do not now, and even more so, will not have any Methodist barriers to be who we are. I think this is, some of you know the term liminal. This is a liminal time in church history, but we have made the tough decisions. The question is, are we going to live up to them? I'm through. Thank you.